Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Anne Lorimor is a role model for all ages. Her not-for-profit Creating Amazing Futures provides opportunities for disadvantaged youth, particularly orphaned and homeless children. Her drive to do this stems from her own childhood, where she too was homeless, living out of a tent with no water, phone, or utilities. In addition to her philanthropic activities, Anne is also an adventurer. She recently summited Kilimanjaro, making her the oldest person to do so. Please welcome Anne Lorimor to Bump in the Road. Anne, welcome to Bump in the Road. There are many, many things I want to ask you, but let's start with Kilimanjaro.
I love to talk about that. When I was in high school, I read Hemingway's Snows of Kilimanjaro, and I thought, oh, what a wonderful thing to be able to do that, but it wasn't on my bucket list. And then a few years ago, my nephew and niece said, we're going to climb Kilimanjaro. I said, let me go with you. And I thought they'd laugh at me, and they said, well, you may if you want. Well, then it came along about maybe 3 or 4 years, and at CEO Space, a man said he was going to take a group up. So I said, hey, seize this opportunity. And he was an older person who had himself climbed all of the 7 summits. Now, he'll understand an older person's problems. So I signed up with him, and I called them, but they couldn't do it. So anyway, just after I got all my brochures done, because my climb was to be done to help my organization, Creating Exciting Futures, to help underserved kids. But anyway, the day after I got the things printed, he said, we're putting it off a year. So I said, I'm going anyway. So I hung in there, and my nephew went, and I had some other people from, a few people I knew from CEO Space. So we climbed that mountain, and I was slow. And he always let us climb at our own pace, and we had lots of different guides so that you could always be alone, and at the end of the day, we'd meet, and I'd say, look, I'm not trying to set any speed records, only an age record. So we got there, and they had this interesting thing of going up the mountain every day about, 1,000 yards or so, 1,000 feet probably, and you'd stay there a while and try to climb it, and then you'd go back down, so that you were always, the expression they used was climb high, and stay low, climb high. Anyway, we did it. And then about 4 months after I finished, a Russian woman climbed that mountain. She was a little older than I.
Oh.
And I thought, this will never do. So I decided that in 2 years, I would do it again. Well, then, just before I was ready, maybe 6 months or so, a man from Colorado climbed it. And he was a little older than I would be when I did it. And I said to myself, all right, 1 more year. But after that, I won't put it off because I might not be able to do it. So I gathered my people together. And again, my nephew went, and we had a man that I met through CEO Space. And then a film crew came along. They decided they wanted to do it. So we're the 3 of them. And we were a small group, but we had a wonderful time. And that mountain has a lot of different climate zones. I think it has about 5 or 6. Anyway, it's like going from the Antarctic up to the tropics. And every one of them was distinct, and it was just an interesting climb. And the food was hearty. The first man told us we should have 5,000 calories a day, and I love that. I mean, I love food, but I couldn't get 5,000 down. So I just ate what I could and did well with that. The really hard part of it is when you get up to the night, and they usually do it at night, and it's 4,000 feet, and you're up at the very top. You're already over 15,000. Now you must go over 19,000. And I was really careful. I tried to make sure I took deep breaths as I went and all these other things. But that was still difficult. And it got very cold. It got down below, it was 10 below, at least, they said, in that final climb. And so it was an interesting experience. The first time I had lots of layers, but they weren't good layers. And so I got so cold that I was absolutely frozen from the inside out, and I was just shivering, just shuddering all the way from the inside out. So my nephew and some of the guides took me to sort of human sandwich and held me and got me warmed back up. And we waited a couple of hours until the sun got a little higher, and then we went. But this last time, I was well dressed. I had on thermal underwear, and I had all kinds of vests on. I had layers and layers, and I had a down jacket with a hood, and I had gloves with liners, and I had socks with liners, and I did not get the least bit cold. I just had some trouble climbing because what turned out was I had 3 broken ribs.
How did you break your ribs?
I slipped on, we were at a safari, and we were at a tent camp just before we started. And I'd been so careful all the time. But the past year, I wouldn't do anything dangerous because I said I wouldn't have time to heal. So I slipped. They had their only rain for months and months, and they had a mat down, and I stepped on the mat, and it went out from under me. There was no rail. And I didn't know they were broken, but I just know I had horrible pain, and I wanted to quit, and I said, no, too many people are counting on me, because once again, I was doing it to get attention and money for the kids. And so I got myself tested, and I knew if I didn't test it too low, they wouldn't let me go. But somehow I passed because I kept breathing past the pain and breathing past the pain. And so then I got up there, and there we are. And this time I felt some excitement about it, and I thought, hey, I made it. And then we came down, and they're now making a documentary about it. It's going to be a full-length documentary, a 90-minute one. And they were in Phoenix interviewing, doing some backstory for it, because they were there recording every bit of it. And I just am really happy about it, because it should do well for the kids. The idea about the kids is that I want to give them a hand up. There are a lot of low-income kids that have no idea what is available for them. They just are ready to settle for what their parents had or something. And so I want to show them their options, help them get the tools to go exactly where they want to go, live lives they love, and then give back. And I can just see it as having a ripple effect eventually and going to a lot of the world and making the world a better place.
I think kindness does have a ripple effect.
And especially when we're encouraging them to pay it forward, to make a difference themselves.
I want to go back to Kilimanjaro just for a second. How was your second trip different than your first, aside from the broken ribs, which I can't even imagine climbing with broken ribs?
Well, I told you I was warm enough because I had learned about the layers being the proper thickness, and that was a very important thing. And otherwise, there wasn't a great deal of difference. We were a little smaller group. The first time we were 15, this time we were 8. And it was fun because I was more prepared this time. And I was prepared that I could wash only with basins for our case, it was 9 days this time. And it was a little bit longer. The first trip was 8 days and this one was 9. And in general, I just was prepared to get all I could out of it. It was the first time too, but this time I paid more attention to the flowers, and I took a few pictures myself. First time my camera had got lost at a camp, and they couldn't get it back to me till I got back down, so I got no pictures of my own on the mountain. This time I did. That was a difference. And of course, I love taking pictures. That's one of my passions. And so I got some that are pretty interesting. And of course, they were supplemented by the cinematographer and all the people with me, all of whom shared with me when we got back.
Have you seen any of the film clips yet?
Not that they've made. Actually, they give us a very, very short clip to use for our virtual summer camp that we held for kids in July. But they didn't want it spread out because until they've done the proper things through the film camps, what do they call them? Film festivals and all the other things, the people they're going to distribute, they have to be very careful what they do. But I did see a very funny one, Pat. I'm not sure it wasn't funny to her, and I had not seen it happen. But when we were climbing, the first day, the gal who was the director, she just lay down on the ground and rolled, sort of almost in agony. And I did see that clip. Somebody showed it to me when the documentary backstory was being filmed. And she was such a good sport and such a lovely person. And she's a right person to do it because she likes my cause and she likes me. And it doesn't hurt if you like the people you're working with.
I actually think it's really important to like the people you're working with.
Well, that was a British understatement. I think so too.
Tell me a little bit about creating exciting futures. You're doing some really interesting things there.
I said to you that I wanted kids who were low income, didn't have as many other opportunities as some. I focus on homeless, foster, and orphan children because I think they have the greatest challenges. And what I do is offer scholarships to places that would give them some kind of a hand up in their lives. One of the ones has been CEO Space. They have a teen feast where they learn networking and brainstorming, and they get membership for life in the parent organization. They get to have meals with the speakers so that they can ask them personal questions and get to know them. They make contacts. They keep their whole lives. And one of the things was an unexpected thing. But one of the girls, when she was being interviewed for the documentary, said, you know, if it weren't for Anne and the organization, I wouldn't be here. She had thought life was unbearable, and she'd already chosen her method and her time.
Wow.
And so I like that old Hebrew saying, he who saves a single life has saved the world entire. I like that.
Well, you never know where to lead.
Oh. And she's doing well now. She has a child of her own, and she's a professional nanny, and she has 2 side businesses, baking and photography. So I'm just really happy with what she's doing.
You know, I looked at part of your summer program this year, and I was really impressed. You have some pretty cool technology going on.
Yes, we used something that had been set up by a man from CEO Space. It's a virtual site to have meetings, and it had an auditorium, several auditoriums. It had separate meeting rooms for private conversations. It had a dining room. It had a boat that you could ride around in. It was really, really an exciting thing. And the kids that came loved it. And we are planning another one probably for November, in which the kids can come and they get to interact with the speakers and with each other and of course with us if they want to. And I just think it was really exciting and use technology that you wouldn't have thought of before COVID, I think. It was a good way to get them, and we could get them from other places than Phoenix, which is where I'm headquartered.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's been really interesting about COVID. It's opened the world to us in some ways, in that now with people used to using Zoom and other types of technology, you can connect with anybody in the world, and it's a much more comfortable interaction.
Much more so than the simple emails because you can see people and react to them personally. And I like that a lot. I'm still happy to get back to in-person meetings. And some of my organizations are now holding hybrid meetings so that the people from afar can continue, but the rest of us can interact with each other personally, which I do like.
Now, you're also working on a book.
We're going to do a book on my life and especially tied in with the things that I've cared about and helped with the philanthropic sides of my life. And it's going to be called Climbing for Change. Focus will be on the climb, but also on the other things I've done in my life to help kids.
I think climbing's such a good metaphor for so many things.
I do agree with you on that one.
What are some of the key things you want to highlight in the book? Have you had a chance to give it much thought?
Well, I will put in about that philanthropy is when it comes to me, it's a 3-generation thing in my life. And now my daughter and my granddaughter are both into helping causes, which I think is great. That will be one of the things we focus on. I will also point out to the kids who might think I don't have any idea what they're going through. I myself was homeless for a time. And it might have been, some people call it homeless the second time when we had to go live with my grandmother. But I didn't ever think of that as homeless. But when we were just going in our covered truck like it was almost like a covered wagon. That was definitely a homeless time. And then for a time, it was wartime and you couldn't really build. And so we had, I don't know, a couple of years in a tent with no running water or electricity or phone or any of the modern things that everybody takes for granted nowadays. So I feel that I can understand what they're going through a lot better than many people can. But the thing about us was somehow I never felt that it was permanent. There were kind people around us, and I always had hope. And that's what I want to give to the kids, that they can. And I'm not going to tell them what to do. If they want to be plumbers and electricians, those are very important. But if they want higher education, then I'm going to find ways to help them get that.
That's amazing. What's one of your favorite stories of all the kids you've helped?
Well, I will. I told you a brief one, and I'm going to tell you another one. There was a boy who had cooked since he was 6 years old, and what he wants to do is be a chef and have his own restaurant. And so when he got to the Teen Feast, he and two other kids brainstormed a fusion restaurant. And the person that helped me set up the organization told them that there are grants for putting needed services into underserved areas, into low-income areas. So that's something that he knows now. And I was able to introduce him to one of my friends who is a restaurateur. And the man said that I could give him his personal number, which I thought was lovely. And then about I don't know, maybe 8 months or a year after we had our meeting, his big brother said to me, he graduated high school. I thought, so? And he said to me, he's the first in his family ever to graduate high school. The whole family was there, and they were so proud of him. And so, and I have met a couple of other chefs in the various business organizations who said they will help mentor him. So if I can just keep him believing this, one of the things I'm going to do, Pat, is get a more robust mentorship program. Because when they come back from one of these meetings, they're all revved up and they're high, but they need something to help them and also to give them some kind of accountability. And so that's what I'm working on, is to have more mentors. One girl came back and she said, I would have 5 things I thought I might want to do when I went, and I now know that I want to go into real estate. So I hunted around and found her someone in real estate who would be her mentor. The possibilities are just endless. And I did read some time ago that psychologists said that people that come from the slums or from poor areas, the ones that make it, there may be just one caring adult. We're going to give them that.
Mentorship makes such a difference for everybody. I mean, you need a mentor to help you establish good work patterns, social patterns, gain knowledge. I think it's really hard to make it without that mentorship.
It is so important. And even people who've had businesses get mentors all the time to take their businesses to a higher level. So if the kids can have that to start with, then they'll be used to the idea and will maybe continue as they go into their own businesses.
Now, when you went through that period as a young girl being homeless, did you feel distinct from the rest of society, or was it something that you didn't really feel the ramifications of? How old were you?
I was 11. We'd always felt different. We were up in rural New Mexico from about 5 to 11, and most of the people we associated with were people in our religious group, which did help. But still, we were the poorest people in that group. My mother and father always worked for nothing or very little, so that and then afterward, if you met anybody from outside that group, you really were weird. I mean, my mother was very old-fashioned in her idea of how we should dress and how we should behave and all those things. And so when we moved to Phoenix after the homeless period, we did move into Arizona, and I just really felt different from the people around me.
Is there an advantage in sometimes being different long-term?
Pat, I don't mind at all now that I know that I think outside the box. But when I was a child, it sort of hurt. You didn't want to feel weird beside the other people. And the worst of it was the girls were the ones that were dressed funny. We had long sleeves and we had our skirts way down. When back at that time, and just before World War II, when the women were wearing their skirts up mid-thigh, and here I am, so like a woman rattling around these clothes. And so the boys didn't have to be that different, and I really resented that because they didn't stand out. When we went out anywhere, we looked weird, and we just stood out. But one woman did ask me, she said to me, I heard that the little boys have to wear the seats of their pants to their knees. I said, no. That might have happened to girls if we wore our pants, but not the boys. And the other thing I noticed, particularly in my life, was that women were discriminated against. I never was a think inside the box kind of person. And when I was in high school, the man that my aunt married said to me, and I told him I liked history. He said, girls aren't supposed to like history. Well, of course, I was a person, And you kept finding that. When I wanted to, I interviewed when I was in high school the superintendent of one of the national forests, and I told him that I would like to be a forest ranger because I love the outdoors and nature, and I just thought it would be a good fit for me. He just looked at me and he said, well, you'd have to fight fires, and how do you think it'd be to be one woman in the middle of a whole truck full of fighting men? And I didn't do it. But now it has happened that they are out there, and there are women rangers.
I think women are making a lot of progress, but there's still a lot to be made.
I agree with that, Pat, but when I think of the steps that we have made, I hope they appreciate it. My nieces, I see them doing things I could never do. Our town manager is a woman, and you've had not very many times you've seen women in town manager, but it's happening now, but it didn't used to. And I remember one professor, after World War II, said, well, I don't know why women should be allowed to go to college. It should be held for the men who need to support their families. Well, I mean, that's pretty awful. And he was a respected professor in the advertising. So anyway, it's changed.
No, it's one of my pet peeves. I've run into it in my lifetime, and I look at it this way. One of the figures I bring up sometimes is in the VC community, the venture capital community. I think less than 4% of deals done are done in organizations run by women. Yet we're half the population. Just from a business perspective, I think people are losing immense opportunities and perspectives by not having a more balanced portfolio.
Well, it is changing, and I continue to have hopes for that. When I was in Texas teaching, that was in the 70s, there was a woman that I met who worked at the bank, and she trained about 3 different heads of the department there. They'd go away and she'd train them, and then they'd stay a while and they'd go, and then she'd train another one. So toward the end, she said, well, I'm training them. I would like to be the head. And they just poo-pooed her. And they just, no, woman cannot be the head of a banking department. Well, I mean, that's not true now. There are lots of women bankers and lots of heads, and still not enough. But I believe that if women just keep pursuing it, I think it's important not to trade on being a woman. There are a few women that try to use their feminine wiles, and I don't like that. I want them to use their professional abilities to show that they're as good as anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. And persistence is such a big part of it. I mean, persistence is part of everything.
That's sort of my middle name. Somebody asked me to come up with a few words to describe myself. And I said, I'm adventuresome and caring and curious and persistent. And I think that showed up at the climbing, because both times I had to put it off, but I let nothing deflect me from what I was going to do.
Well, Kilimanjaro requires a lot of perseverance in that last day is supposed to be really brutal.
Well,
where
it
you
is.
Go up,
The 4,000
feet. 4,000 feet is a lot no matter what, but at night, almost 19.
You got, 19,341 is what you came to at the end. And also the cold. It was hard. And as I said, I wasn't cold the second time. I was prepared and I was dressed. But the first time, I really, really, I think I had a touch of hypothermia. I truly do. And so I had people to save me, and that was great. But I never did have to take any oxygen. I was proud of that because I didn't think it should be counted if you had to have oxygen to get up the mountain. And I didn't have other things that people did. If I fell down, I wouldn't let anybody help me up. I got up myself and walked on.
How was the walk down? Was it satisfying? Or did you just want to get to the bottom?
I'd done what I meant to do, and getting down was not so exciting. It was just going. But when I got back to the hotel, it was pretty exciting because people came flying from all over to have their picture taken with me. One guide came and he wanted this picture with me, and he said, you beat out my client. And I think it had been the man who did the climb the year before. He says, and I want to take you up when you're 100.
Are you game for it?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see how my health stays. As if I were as good as I am now, I definitely would go. I wouldn't mind doing it again, setting another record myself.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.